Hey, shalom, shalom, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back. Welcome back to Reading with Shiloh. What's up? This is part 18, man. This is part 18 of Reading with Shiloh, man. We back at it. We back at it, ready to roll. Ready to get this next rowing session on. So we can finish rowing through chapter 7, which is entitled Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. That's chapter 7. We might be halfway through. No, we're not halfway through. We're about 1/3 of the way through chapter 7. About 1/3 of the way chapter 2. We got about maybe 10 pages, 10, 11 pages left. Something like that. 10, 11 pages left of chapter 7. But we're going to push our way through it, man. We're going to push our way through chapter 7. We're going to make some headway. We're going to try to get going. Get going. And get at least as much as we can out the way. As much as we can out the way, man. As much as we can. Oh, man. Good day. Breath to breathe, so we have all we need to succeed. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to succeed today. We're going to succeed in getting through chapter 7, or at least as much as we can within an hour. We're going to read for about an hour. We'll try to get that far. Make some stuff happen, man. So we got Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. We're going to go ahead. Hey, like, comment, subscribe, share. Tell your people, man, Shiloh out here reading shit. When you come on in, man, hey, like, put a comment in the chat so I can know the chat working, man. Every little bit helps the channel to grow, and that's what we're trying to do as well. Keep the channel growing and going. Growing and going, man. But we're going to work our body, work our mind, and work our body going out again, man. That's what we're going to do. That's the routine that I'm trying to develop, that I'm trying to keep some consistency at, so we can help build some things up, man. Get health. Health is wealth, is what they say. Health is wealth. So, along with having our body healthy, we're trying to get our body healthy. We want to try to get our mind healthy as well by what we inputting into our mind. Expose the lies, unearth the truths, see what it is. Shalom, shalom. Shalom, LOL. Shalom. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do 25 things right quick before we start reading, before we jump back into Bas de Fleuve, man. Get y'all butts up. Y'all do 25 things, 25 somethings, whatever it is, man. 25 somethings. Just, you know what your body need. You know what your body need. You know what you can do. Don't hurt yourself, but do something. Do something. Do something. Do something before we read. Start getting the blood pumping. Start getting the blood pumping before we jump into Miss GWENDOLYN MIDLO Hall's book, Africans in Colonial Louisiana, Chapter 7, Part 18, Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. I'm going to work my little 15s right quick, man. Let me do 25. 1, 2, let's get it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we'll read. 8, 9, 10, 11. Let me pick this up. There we go. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Oh, we get it. 20, 21, 22. I want to do some push-ups too. 23, 24. I'll give you 25. 25. I think I'll give you 25 push-ups too. I think I can do that. I feel good tonight. It feels good tonight. So let's get it right. I'll give you 25. 25 of them suckers, baby. 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, ooh-wee, 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 3, 4, 25. All right. I'll give you 25 and 25. 25 lighters on my dresser. We did 25 and 25. I hope you did something. Let it be just a little bit to start your routine. 25 ain't nothing. 25 is just something. Just something to get started. Something to get started, something to get going. Sometimes you got to start off with low repetition so you can build yourself up. Something just to keep moving forward. Keep moving forward so you can get better and better and better. That's the objective, to keep getting better. All right. Now, let's read. Let's read and see what Miss Gwendolyn Midlo Hall has to say in this next part in Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. I wish I knew what that meant. I wish I knew what Bas de Fleuve meant. Let me see. Before we read. Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve meaning. Meaning in English. The river widens at this place, later becoming the bay, that discharges into the Atlantic Ocean and is often nicknamed Bas de Fleuve, meaning the low river. Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. Or bottom of the river. Bottom of the river. Bas de Fleuve. Bas de Fleuve. All right. Chapter 7. This is part 2. It's part 16 of the reading, but this is part 2, I guess, of chapter 7. Part 2 of chapter 7. Bas de Fleuve. Or Bas de Fleuve. This is only the first. This is the second third of chapter 7. In the early 1783, Chakala, a slave of Madame Mandeville, guided a military expedition to Ville-Galard in return for his freedom and 200 pesos. And on March the 1st, 1783, Don Guido Dufasat, second lieutenant of the Fixed Infantry Regiment of Louisiana, informed acting Governor MIDLO that he left the capital commanding a number of blacks and free mulattoes to search for some fugitive slaves. They killed 1 Maroon and captured 23. The raiding party used 7 pirogues, some commanded by whites with crews of free blacks, mulattoes, and some slaves. And the party arrived at Lake Bourg. They landed and walked into the woods, where they found groups of blacks who began to move their baggage as soon as they saw the expedition. And the raiding party tried to surround the blacks, but they fled, and the order was given to fire. The discharge killed 1 black. 12 Maroons were captured, including Juan Luis and slaves of the Regio. Now 10 escaped and could not be overtaken. Chakala guided the expedition to Ville-Galard, where they found 8 more Maroons, and 1 was seized and the rest surrendered. The captives were bound and placed in the pirogues. Patricio McNamara testified that he commanded a pirogue in which there were 7 men, blacks and mulattoes, 3 of whom were free, 3 of whom were his slaves, and 1 of whom was a slave belonging to another person. And they headed back to New Orleans with some of the captured Maroons. And they were about 3/4 of a league away from the other pirogues when the small pirogue with 4 Maroons drew up about 10 paces from them, and 2 gunshots were discharged from the little pirogue. The first shot killed DeReggio's Juan Luis and one of the prisoners. Scipion, another captured Maroon, was wounded in the finger in his right hand, and McNamara fired upon his pursuers and wounding Jasmine, one of the 4 attacking Maroons. Jasmine fell into the water, overturning the little pirogue. Oh yeah, because it don't take much. It don't take much to flip them pirogues. Oh. Man overboard. The other 3 Maroons fell into the bayou, losing their guns. All 4 swam towards McNamara's pirogue, and McNamara assumed that the term, let me skip the page, assumed that the Maroons intended to get into his pirogue and surrender, but they all grabbed McNamara's pirogue on the side. One of them shouted to the rest, "Use force!" And they tried to capsize McNamara's pirogue, but failed. And the crew members rained blows on the Maroons, and they were obliged to let go. One fled. The rest of them tried to capsize the pirogue again without success. One of the attacking Maroons, Esteban, was drowned when his skull was smashed with the butt of the gun. The rest headed to the shore, and the raiding party pursued them, and 2 more captured, and 1 escaped. And the one who escaped was Saint Malo. Now, the funny thing to me about these pirogues and in this bayou is there's nothing but gators in there. And them boys was swimming up in that thing like it wasn't nothing with them gators and water moccasins up in there. Big gulffish, big catfish. They wasn't worried about big snapping turtles. Hey, they wasn't worried about nothing. Alejandro, a 15-year-old fugitive who had been gone for a year and had surrendered voluntarily, testified that he had seen Saint Malo and 3 other Maroons in a boat. And they said that they were going to free the prisoners. And the 2 captives, Carlos and Jasmine, testified that they had both been fugitives for about 2 months. A curator was named for Carlos because he was under age 25, and he was 22 years old, native from Guyana, who had been living in one of the Maroon cabins in the Cipiero, which is the, if you weren't here the last one, Cipiero means the cypress swamp, behind M. Chotbert's plantation. And when asked about his occupation, Jasmine, the other captive, replied that he squared timber for a sawmill. He had been with 10 or 12 other Maroons behind Madame Beneview's plantation, and the night before their encounter with McNamara's pirogue, St. Malo returned from New Orleans with the news that the 3 mulattoes were forming an expedition to search for them. The Maroons were heading for Ville-Galard to look for their wives and their baggage when they met the pirogue commanded by McNamara. They all had guns and other weapons in the pirogue, and St. Malo and Esteban fired simultaneously. Jasmine was asked where he had got the ammunition. He replied that he had bought some of it with him from his master's plantation, and the rest he had brought from the plaza in New Orleans, but he did not remember the name of the person who had sold it to him. And when asked why the Maroons walked around armed with gun, hatchet, and knife, he replied, "We Maroons never walk about without arms, in case we should pass some house on the road, and besides, since we are fugitives, we have no other way to live except by eating the things we kill. Then, 2, we cannot leave our guns exposed in the Cipier because they would be stolen." The widow of Domingo Saint Amant petitioned that Carlos and Jasmine, her slaves, be declared free of the crime imputed to them, and she claimed that only St. Malo fired on McNamara's pirogue. The others had grasped the boat to stop from drowning, and he can judge by 2,000 pesos paid by DeReggio for the appraised value of these slaves Juan Luis killed in McNamara's pirogue. The 200 pesos normally due to the master of executed slaves was only a small fraction of their value. Madame Saint-Amant, slaves were found guilty and sentenced to 300 lashes. Damn. 300 lashes and sent into exile, 33 leagues from the city, and Saint-Amant and Belleville each got the usual 200 pesos for their dead slaves. And Chacala got 200 pesos for risking his life by telling where the passage was, and Chacala was freed. The most detailed picture we have of St. Malo is contained in the testimony of Juan Pedro, one of the Maroons arrested at Ville Galard during the March 1st, 1783 raid. Now, Juan Pedro had been a fugitive for 3 years and had associated with St. Malo for about a year and a half. And he identified several slaves who sold him ammunition and free mulattoes who had sold him a musket. Other slaves gave his ammunition, but he claimed that he never used it. And he testified that Bernardi's slave Alejandro supplied St. Malo many times with the munitions he needed to exchange for large tubs, troughs, and other merchandise that St. Malo made. St. Malo always went out to get the powder they needed. And on one occasion, Juan Pedro, his wife Maria, their son Julicoer, and St. Malo went by boat to Bay St. Louis on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Each of them had a gun, and they encountered a party of Americans who tricked them into coming ashore by offering to meet them to exchange guns. And when they met, the Americans shot Juan Pedro in the neck and seized all of them except for St. Malo and took all their guns. The Americans bound them, put them in a pirogue, and headed towards New Orleans. And when the Americans stopped and went on shore, leaving one person to guard their prisoner, St. Malo appeared and untied their bonds. He gave them the guns, which were unloaded, and took a hatchet and a carbine belonging to one of the Americans who had gone ashore. And Holy Corel snatched the hatchet and broke the American's head with it, killing him. And they fled with the pirogues and baggage of their captors and went to Chief Montour, where they stayed 3 months while Juan Pedro's wound healed. And after he had recovered somewhat, St. Malo left him, but he returned many times to his cabin to visit him. And St. Malo moved around freely. He lived at Chef Montour, but he frequently visited Ville Galard, where he had built a cabin, and he had gone to the German coast to look for someone and apparently returned too late to stop the impending raid on March the 1st, 1783. And after he received news of it, Juan Pedro said St. Malo told him that he killed four Englishmen who had left the convoy plantation loaded with provisions for Pensacola and Mobile and taking possession of a gun, which he gave to Mitchell, another major Maroon leader. The testimony of the Maroons captured on the March 1st of 1783 raid revealed strong family ties among them, and entire families fled together. And apparently, Ville Galard was the haven for the wives and children of the Maroons. And Gaton testified that she ran away because her master punished her, and she was a fugitive for about 2 months. No one induced her to run away, and she left on her own free will with her husband, Huberto, her son, Cupidon, her daughter, Katash, and her little son, Bautista, there we go, Bautista, all Hironique Desprez's slaves. They hid behind their master's plantation for 2 months, eating rice and meat. They had taken the rice with them, but the meat was supplied by other fugitives her husband met in the woods. She identified these other fugitives as 4 slaves belonging to 3 different masters. And they left the bayou and went to Ville Galard, where they already were houses in which to live. Now, Gaton said she met several other fugitives along the way, all heading for Ville Galard, and they joined her. And 2 of them were women. One was La Valette, who was killed by a gunshot when Ville Galard attacked. And Gaton testified that there were 11 people living in Ville Galard, and she identified Yole Cuyer, and Juan Pedro as the leaders. Now there were many new and old cabins that were occupied in common. The Maroons ate the root of an herb called China smilax. China smilax. China smilax. I wonder what that is. The Maroons ate the root of a herb called China smilax, which they pounded into flour and cooked. The strength of family ties was revealed in the testimony of Teresa. She was Gaton's daughter-in-law, and Teresa ran away because she wished to go with her husband, Cupidon. Now, both of them belonged to Henrique Desperez, and before they went to Ville-Galard, they lived in the fields and woods of their master's plantations, eating rice and corn they received or had carried away with them. She testified that there were about 6 of her master's slaves and many others living in Ville-Galard, and Teresa gave herself up when she saw a fugitive who she thought was her husband being killed by the whites. Now, Katish, daughter of Gaton, was captured at Ville-Galard, and she testified that she ran away because her mother and stepfather were running away. They stayed in the woods behind their master's plantation, eating what they brought with them, as well as some ducks and birds they caught. Now at Ville-Galard, they ate roots and herbs, powdered and cooked. And here we have one family, all Desperez's slaves, consisting of mother, stepfather, son, daughter-in-law, daughter, and small child, who either ran away together or followed each other. And they were 6 out of 11 or 12 slaves, as witnesses claimed were living at Ville-Galard. The testimony of Maria reveals another family network involved in flight, all of them living at Ville-Galard. And again, the flight was precipitated by the masters punishing the wife, and she was accompanied by her husband, Juan Pedro, and her son, Holy Cuyer, both of them the leaders of the Maroons, and Pelegi, her daughter. Now, Juan Pedro testified that he had been gone for 3 years, and it is unclear whether he had left first and came back for his family, or if they all left together. And before going to Ville-Galard, they wandered about in the woods, living by stealing provisions from the plantations in the surrounding neighborhood. After they moved to Ville-Galard, Juan Pedro went to the city at night with fish to sell, and he used the money to buy powder and balls and other things that they needed. And when arrested, Maria was with Juan Pedro and her children, fishing in the bayou near Ville-Galard. Now, Juan Pedro testified that he ran away because his master punished his wife and threatened to do the same to him. And the first year he went to the lake shore and ate 4 barrels of corn that he raised himself, and supplemented by whatever he could steal from the plantations. The second year was passed raising provisions at Ville-Galard. And the third year he worked at Madame Mandeville's land for a Negre slave named Colis, who was the son of Chicala, and the Mandeville slaves who had led the raiding party at Ville-Galard. Now, perhaps Chicala was able to discover the location of Ville-Galard because Juan Pedro worked for his son, and Chicala profited from this information to gain his freedom and a monetary reward. Now, Juan Pedro testified that when he left his master's plantation, he took a horn full of powder, and when he was working with Madame Mandeville, slaves Colos, the later supplied him with half a pound of powder and a pound of munitions and 5 or 6 balls. Now, here was another family living in Ville-Galard. And since the Maroons who attacked the Macamora Piro were going to Ville-Galard to look for their wives, a woman Maroon named La Valette was killed there, and Gaton testified that she was going to join a group of Maroons heading for Ville-Galard, whose name she could not remember, except for the woman who was killed. The witnesses were obviously protecting the Maroons still at large by undercounting the population there, and the existence of many houses, old and new, that were occupied in common lends further credence to the conclusion that Ville-Galar was more populated than the captured Maroons indicated. Now, it was an established settlement in 1783, and a growing one, and the strength of the family ties among Afro Creoles, slaves and free, black and mixed bloods, were recognized by the syndicate of the Cabildo of New Orleans, and their experience with the militia of the free blacks and the mixed bloods made officials reluctant to use them against the Maroons. And he pointed out that both blacks and mixed bloods of free status, including members of the militia, not only engaged in commerce with the Maroons, but even favor them and supply them all they need for their defense. The Spanish officials also discovered from criminals whom we have apprehended that most of the Maroons are Creoles of this province, whose kinship networks extended into New Orleans and other settlements, and their family ties were so strong that their kinship groupings so numerous that free blacks and coloreds were afraid that the relatives of the Maroons that might capture or kill would seek vengeance and retaliate against them. And thus, the expeditions by the free black and colored militia had proved to be useless. Now, the syndic distributing the blacks and mulattoes suggested that as many soldiers of the regular army as possible be sent against the Maroons to accompany the militia and the free blacks. And in an ordinance dated May 1st, 1784, Governor Miro proclaimed that the free blacks and mulattoes of the colony would be held especially responsible for all damages that the public suffered if they had information about the Maroons and had not communicated it with the authorities, or if they did not associate the rooting out of the Maroons when asked to do so. And clearly, then we see a powerful family network uniting Maroons and plantation slaves, and including free blacks and mulattoes, most of whom that was claimed actively aided the Maroons, or at least feared them and their related relatives enough to discourage them from informing on them or pursuing them. Shalom. The raid on Ville-Galar was a serious blow to St. Malo and the Maroons of Bas-de-Fleuve. Now, but the authorities weren't able to follow up their victory, and in May 1784, Miro wrote to Captain General Galvez that while the previous years an expedition against the Maroons resulted in the capture of 43 of them, their main leaders had escaped, and the Maroons were attacking the white settlements. Now, every day, they were finding the remains of dead cattle in the fields, and the settlers feared for their lives because 6 voyageurs had been killed by the Maroons on 2 separate occasions, and it was difficult to find the whereabouts of the Maroons. Now, Miro had sent a black spy to join the Maroons, hoping to get information about St. Malo's whereabouts. The spy brought back vague news on 2 occasions, and Miro concluded that the spy was deceiving him and stopped using him. And meanwhile, winter arrived, the coldest winter ever known in the colony, and it was impossible to organize an expedition against the Maroons because the expedition members would have had to remain outdoors for 2 weeks, crossing various frozen swamps, and they would have died of cold. And at the beginning of April, Don Carlos Honorato Oliver, a leading planter, was approached by his slave Bastien, a Maroon, who was a member of St. Malo's band. Now, attracted by the offer of a reward, Bastien offered to guide the military expedition to the Passage where the Maroons lived, and Miro had to go to Pensacola to negotiate a treaty with the Indian nations. Lieutenant Colonel Francisco Balugni was appointed acting commander of the province in the absence of Miro, and Captain Don Gilberto Gallimard was part of the charge of the expedition against the Maroons. Now, Baligny wrote regularly to Myro, giving details of the ups and downs of his efforts to destroy the Maroon settlements. But before Myro left, he promulgated a special ordinance on May 1st, 1784, aimed at preventing slaves, free blacks, and mulattoes from helping the Maroons. The ordinance was prefaced, with the statement that since all the efforts made during this rule to convince the Maroons to return to their masters had failed, officials were faced with the hard necessity of taking more serious measures to prevent the frequent robberies and incidents for which the Maroons were responsible. This ordinance went to great lengths to restrict the movement of slaves. It authorized any settler to give 25 lashes on the spot and then return to the master. And any slave who was off the master's plantation without the written permit, whether by day or by night, on foot or on horseback, armed or unarmed. And if a Maroon was apprehended, the settler was to bring him or her to the prison to be punished. And trade with slaves was outlawed, particularly the sale of alcohol, powder, or munitions. The ordinance prohibited masters from leaving horses or firearms in the possessions of slaves, except for hunters, whose guns were to be marked with the name of the master. And masters were forbidden to send their slaves hunting during May and June of 1784. And they were ordered to inspect their slaves' quarters regularly for fugitive slaves and to imprison any of their slaves who aided the fugitives by giving them food or shelter. Only skilled slaves, such as blacksmiths and carpenters, were to be allowed to work for themselves, and free blacks and mulattoes were required to carry at all times a document proving their status, like a driver license. During the spring of 1784, a dispute broke out between members of St. Malo's band and the slaves of the Prevost plantation over the attentions of a woman slave. And before this conflict, there was a close symbiotic relationship between the Maroons and the Prevost slaves. The Maroons also received all the help they needed from the Prevost slaves, including arms and ammunition. And in return, the Maroons did all the work in the woods that Prevost demanded of his slaves, cutting lumber, collecting firewood, and making stakes. And the Maroons cultivated all the Kanakas, a vegetable garden of the Prevost slaves. And the Prevost slaves stole cattle and drove them to the edge of the woods, and the Maroons killed and butchered the cattle. And the Maroons and the Prevost slaves ate together in the wood every day. And many of the Maroons of St. Malo band had their wives among the Prevost slaves, and the Prevost slaves had wives among the Maroons. On March 19, 1784, the Prevost slaves brought to Bologna a Maroon they had wounded after he had defended himself with a gun. Bologna praised the Prevost slaves, and he wrote to Miro, "If all the blacks were as vigilant and exact as those of Prevost, in a short time there would be no more Maroons." And the next day he changed his mind about the Prevost slaves, and another Maroon, this one a slave belonging to Chabet, was brought in by Dufaucet's slaves, and he had been living in the cabins behind the Prevost plantation with St. Malo's band for 6 months. Bologna described him as a Negro Criollo y Muladino. Negro Criollo y Muladino. And angered by the Prevost slaves, intimidated by Bologna, he revealed the support of the Prevost slaves had given St. Malo and the Maroons. The dispute with the Prevost slaves cut off St. Malo and his band from vital supplies and information and exposed them to attack. And abandoning their settlements behind the Prevost plantation in late April, almost all of them went to GWENDOLYN. And before leaving, St. Malo told all those who did not want to follow him that they should return to their masters. And some of the Maroons who had committed no return to their masters, some of the Maroons who had committed no other crime than to run away, and who did not want to enter forever into the wilderness of GWENDOLYN, separated from St. Malo, and Shabert's slave and several other Maroons returned to the cabins behind the Prevost plantation. Now, none of them knew exactly where St. Malo and his band were going, but Michel, one of the principal Maroon leaders, remained behind, probably to gather information and supplies. Now, Shabert's slaves were sure that Michel knew the exact location where St. Malo intended to reestablish his settlement, and because he was supposed to join him, Shabert's slaves reported that St. Malo's band consisted of 20 to 25 men and 5 women, and some of the Maroons who had remained behind the Prevost plantation had been captured by the Prevost slaves, and the others were scattered. And 4 slaves belonging to Madame Duracourt was special favorites of the Prevost slaves, and they had hidden them in the woods. The informant offered to show Bolugny their exact location. To test the reliability of this informant, Bolugny ordered Galmard to lead 12 mulattoes and 6 grenadiers to attack the settlement of the 4 Duracourt Maroons behind the Prevost plantation, and Bolugny was optimistic about the results of this attack. But his hopes were dashed, and Galmard and his troops left at sunset and did not arrive at the settlement until 2 a.m. And after following the worst imaginable trail through mud up to their waists, upon their arrival, they found the settlement destroyed, and Bolugny assumed that his informant had tipped off the Prevost slaves that he planned to reveal the location of the settlement. Bolugny was pessimistic, he wrote. Come on, pages stuck together. There we go. He wrote, "We have wasted 14 pesos on this expedition, and I am afraid that it will always be the same. All these swamps are so terrible and so vast that it is impossible to attack all the Maroon settlements which are spread out in the swamps without having a sure guide for every shack, where there are never more than 3 or 4 blacks. And besides, the noise which many men must make in order to go along such passages serve as a warning and facilitates the escape which they are sure to find within 10 paces of their huts, and throwing themselves into the water up to their necks. A single gunshot alarms all of them. The situation of this country is fatal, and above all, when the Maroons find shelter in all the plantations." Now, in spite of the 1,000 difficulties of the terrain of GWENDOLYN, Bolugny was still confident that he could wipe out St. Malo's band, because there were no longer any position to receive aid from the plantations. As well as we shall see, Bolugny was right. Now, Bolugny's confidence in Shabert's slaves were further shaken when the Maroon, who belonged to Madame Lecomte, and who had given himself up, told him that many of the Maroons, who, according to Shabert's slave, were with St. Malo in GWENDOLYN, and were actually in settlements behind the Bennevue plantation. Now, when Shabert's slave offered to bring in Michel's head within 3 days of Bolugny's released him, Bolugny did not accept the proposition because he feared his informant would stay with the Maroons and enlighten them about Bolugny's plan based upon the questions he had asked. But Bolugny was taken with the idea of putting prices on the heads of the Maroon leaders, and he suggested a price of 200 pesos and freedom to any slave who brought in the head of St. Malo, and freedom to any slave bringing in the head of Michel, Philip, or Etienne, or the 3 most daring and fearless Maroons. And Bolugny had been assured by the Rigadors that Miro would approve such an offer. But since he had not heard it directly from Miro, he urged Miro to approve. Bolugny assured Miro that this is no doubt that they would soon be destroyed. And it seems to me that this method of the surest and least costly, and I do not believe that it is in any way against the laws, which are always intended to assure public tranquility. I bet. The laws are intended. Laws which are always intended to assure public tranquility. Now, Miro disapproved of the suggestion that the price be placed on St. Milo's head, but Beligny explained that he made the suggestion only out of frustration. A list of Maroons remaining in the St. Milo band was dated June 3rd, 1784, the day after that bastion, their most reliable spy reappeared. So it's a bunch of names. St. Malo, Cecilia, Michel, Batista, Caton, Jason, Francisca, Juan, Telemec, Cesar, Teresa, Jonathan, Mélie, Nanita, Bastien, Margarita, Jean St. Louis, Preston, Ismael, Charlotte, Colas, Genevieve, Philippe, Julie, Bacchus, Francisco, Guis, Margarita, Bonus, and Rosetta. Dupart's Maroons, 3 of Verret's Maroons and 2 of Canut's Maroons had just given themselves up, and there was also a band of 5 Maroons in Barataria. 1 had been captured, and the other 4 described as Famoso Pacaros, notorious rogues, were still at large. And on May 28th, Miro wrote to Beligny approving a military expedition against the Maroons. 50 men were to pursue St. Milo's band in the Galardland, and 40 more men were to be stationed at Lake Borg and at the entrances of the bayous leading into the lake to prevent the escape of Maroons pursued by soldiers. And members of the expedition were to be upright people with known talent and experience. Now, the fund of to compensate masters was exhausted, and the Cabildo of New Orleans was to pay for the expedition and to advance money to compensate masters whose slaves were killed or sentenced to death as a result of the expedition. The big slave owners controlled the Cabildo, and they had the most to lose if the Maroons were allowed to continue to undermine slavery. If escape through the passages continued and increased, and the slaves feared no retribution, the slave system could have dissolved, resulting in the redistribution of wealth in favor of the slaves and of the sectors of society that were relating economically to the Maroons as free workers at the expense of the large slaveholders. I'm gonna pause there. I want to see how many pages I got left. We got about 6 pages left. I think I'm gonna finish off this page. Yeah, I'm gonna finish off this page. I think I'm gonna finish off this page and get to a stopping point. All right. Masters with heavy investments in slaves and an authoritarian approach to controlling them probably were incapable of adjusting to a free labor system. They stood to lose their capital investment in slaves and to become economically irrelevant. And acting through the Cabildo, the big slave owners manipulated the fears of the white population, trying to create hysteria about a mythical revolt of the Maroons to take over the colony. And the danger the Maroons posed was the destruction, not of the colony in which they had an important stake, but of slavery, at least for the Creole slaves of the colony. Now, Miro, in his letter to Captain General Galvez, explained that the masters dared not make their slaves fulfill their obligations to them, and that the Maroons were hard to capture, and that they were afraid the Maroons would grow to the point that they would openly attack the plantations. But there was no hint of an open revolt of the slaves to take over the colony. Now, the syndic of the Cabildo of New Orleans described St. Malo as audacious, daring, and active, which was fair enough. But he also portrayed him as a ruthless and bloodthirsty. He claimed that St. Malo killed a woman Maroon, whom he had chosen to be his wife. And because she went to return to her master, and that he killed his master, and that he killed a Maroon for refusing to carry out his orders to kill a calf. He presented the killing of the Americans at Bay St. Louis and the killing of the Englishmen and the seizure of their pirogues as if these incidents had just happened, and as if the Americans at Bay St. Louis were innocent travelers returning home who were assaulted and robbed along the way. He failed to add that the Maroons had been tricked, that Juan Pedro had been shot in the throat, and the rest captured and bound, and that they had killed their captors while escaping. He dealt with Hilaire Couer's axe attack against the Americans as if it were a separate incident from the Bay St. Louis killings, and Juan Pedro had testified about all these events after he was captured on March 1st, 1783. The Maroons were never accused of attacking any colonists of Louisiana except when they were defending themselves against raids into what they considered to be their territory. The Maroons' violence was almost entirely defensive. The syndic of Cabildo claimed that until now, the blacks of this colony have had neither the temerity nor the cruelty to soil their hands in the blood of whites. And this was clearly absurd. And St. Malo and his band had only attacked Englishmen or Americans, and the distinction between them was not very clear in 1783. These attacks took place when Spain was still at war with England, and blacks and mulattoes, slaves and free, had been eagerly recruited into the Spanish army too, and indeed soil their hands in the blood of whites. The syndic reported that masters were obliged to suffer in silence because, at the slightest reproof, slaves would threaten to join the runaways, and that several plantations had remained uncultivated because of the flight of some blacks. And he complained of the daring of the blacks who are presently no longer under the power of their masters, but proclaim openly their intentions of going to join the Maroons. And we'll stop there. We'll stop there, man. That was part 18. Let me see how many pages I got left. I'm going to count that as a half. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5.5 pages left. We have 5.5 pages left till we finish chapter 7 and get to chapter 8. Chapter 8, which is Point Capee Post, Race Mixture and Freedom at a Frontier Settlement. Point Capee, man, down the road. That's down the road. Point Capee. That was part 18, man. Part 18 of Miss Gwendolyn Midlo Hall's book, Africans in Colonial Louisiana. I hope y'all can see it the right way, because it don't look the right way to me, man. It looked backwards. It looked like it was backwards. But if it is backwards, that's the name of the book by Miss Gwendolyn Midlo Hall. That has been part 18, man. We succeeded. We succeeded in doing what we needed. Now it's time to get the workout in before we dip out. Before we dip out of here tonight, man. I hope everybody's had a wonderful night. I hope that it was something that you could take from the reading, some type of information you could gather from it. I know they was using them damn slaves, that's for sure. They was using them slaves. Slaves was snitching on other slaves for that freedom, man. Or they was snitching on them damn Maroons for that freedom. Or you want to get free? Better tell me where they be. Oh, right on, massa. Shit, niggas was snitching, man. 200 pesos. 200 pesos and freedom. Shit. Sounded like a meal ticket, man. Sounded like a meal ticket. And they was snatching that meal ticket up. They said some of them Maroons was jumping in neck high water. Water to their neck. Boy, I'm telling, gators in there. Oh, gators. There's gators in them waters. Gators. And back then, oh, talk about big gators. Big gators. Because we see water now. A lot of them swamps now have been hunted. Have been hunted and have been being hunted for a while now. They've been pulling out big gators out of big gators, big snapping turtles, big all type of stuff out of them swamps for a minute now. For a minute now. But by the time that these people was introduced into these swamps, it wasn't a vast hunting population that was killing off a lot of these animals. So it was natural selection in these places. It was survival of the fittest, eat or be eaten type situation down there in them swamps, man. And big gators was thriving. Big gators was thriving. Big snapping turtles was thriving because ain't nobody was there to kill them and mess with them. But shit. And they jumping in that water like it ain't nothing. Oh, I tell you how they wanted to get away. I tell you how bad they wanted to get away. They was like, fuck them gators. I'm getting out of here. Swim for your life, Negro. Swim for your life. Because that's what it was, man. Swimming for your life, boy. Oh, man. Swim for your life. Hide for your life. They was on the run for months at time, years, some of them. Living hiding in plain sight, right there behind the master's plantation, right behind the plantation, shit. Helping out here and there, making a little, hustling. I guess that's what they would be called. It was hustling, making a living, man. Hustling, making a living. Come on, let's get these 25 out the way. Let's get these 25 dumbbell presses out the way. And then I'll do 25 more push-ups. And then we'll be done for the night. We'll finish it out. We'll close it out for the night. We'll close it out for the night, man. And I'm going to go lay my ass down. Lay your body down. Sometimes you think about, even though, like how peaceful we live right now, man, how peaceful we live. Even though, they might have people who might want to harm you. It's rare. You might have somebody who might break into your house or whatever, but you can defend yourself, even though there's still some consequences behind that sometimes. But, the picking up everything and going as the Maroons do at the slightest sound of the palmetto, the dried palmetto leaves crinkling along the walkway. The slightest sound. Hey, they had to, come on, get out of here. They had to go and move whatever you had there, man. It was gone. You, your wife, your children, you take your shit and you roll. People ain't doing that shit now. You ain't got to do that shit now, man. You ain't got to do that shit now. You ain't got to get up. You kill somebody, you ain't got to leave. You ain't running. It ain't like you're on the run. We got it good now, man. We got it good. We got it so good that you could read whatever you want to read for the most part. You can learn whatever you want to learn for the most part. You can almost do whatever you want to do. It's all up to you. You have the choice. You have all you need to succeed. You could tear down the plantations in your mind. You ain't got to worry about nothing. And rebuild it up strong with a good foundation. You can do that. It's up to you. We ain't got to pick cotton, rice, bust sugar cane down unless you want to. Unless you go get a job to get paid for that shit. You ain't got to sweat out wood. You got tools that'll do that shit now. Man, hey, we living good compared to them. Shit, man. Be thankful for what you have. Be thankful for what you got right now and make the best of what you got. Sometimes you got to be content too. You got to be content with what you do have and make the best of what you got. Yeah, it may not be where you want to be right now, but you gotta hey, push forward in that. Push forward in that shit. Maintain what you got, push forward and add to it. Let's get these 25 out the way and then we'll move, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 25, 14, 15, 16, 17. Remember, start somewhere, man. 18, 19. If all you got is 10 pounds, start at 10 pounds. If all you got is 5 pounds, start at 5 pounds. Man, just raise your arms sometimes. Maybe that's all you can do, but you got to start somewhere. 20. Something's better than nothing. 21. 22. 23. 24. One more. 25. 25 of them. Let's get some push-ups out of it. 25 push-ups and then we're done. 25 push-ups and then we're done. 25 of them bad boys. Let's get 25, man. What you gonna do? You gonna do something? Or you gonna stay there on your ass and be fat all your life? Fuck that. That's what I say. Fuck that. Get off your ass. Do something. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Get off your ass. Ooh. Well, that's it, man. That's been part 18. That's been part 18 of Reading with SHILO. We doing some shit. We learning some shit, man. We taking our time and building ourselves up. Building our minds up, building our body up. I'm definitely building my reading skills up. That's for sure. Trying to build my reading skills. Shit, I fuck around and build my French back up around here. All this French I've been reading, shit. Man, it is what it is. Hey, but a little bit at a time, man. It's all choices, choices. You have choices to choose. You could choose to be a bullshit all your life. Or you could choose to make changes and differences in your life. And sometimes it take more. It take a day. It take, more than a day. Sometimes you can make the changes quickly, and sometimes you have to make the changes in increments over time. Sometimes it takes longer than you would like to. But that's where the discipline comes in. That's where the consistency comes in. And if you can do these things, then changes will happen. It may not be the way you want it to be, but even some of these changes, you may not see yourself, but others may see them. Others may see the changes before you see them in yourself. But you're still being watched. People are watching, and if not, make the changes for yourself. Make it for the little ones that's coming up after us that are watching us. Let's give better examples. Let's be better examples. Time will tell it all. Time will tell it all. And as long as you have breath to breathe, and you got all you need to see to succeed, and you got time. You got some time, man. You got some time to make better choices and better decisions than what you've been doing. What we've been doing, what I've been doing, what you have been doing. Make better decisions. In all, let the Most High's will be done. Let his will be done. whether we like it or not. Let his will be done. Whatever religion you are, hey, practice that, go harder in that, you know. Whatever you study, practice that, go harder in that. Whatever you build it better, go harder in it, man. Make more of an effort. Don't put off today, don't put off tomorrow the things you can do today. You know, sometimes it's easier said than done. I understand, man. You be tired, long day. Oh, my neck and my back. Your body hurt. But shit, hey, man, you have to make an effort. You have to make an effort because nobody gonna make the effort for you. You have to make the effort for yourself. What you gonna do? I don't know what you came to do. I came to be better though. That's what I came to. I came to be better. So, hey, like, comment, subscribe, share. Tell you people, man, y'all out here reading shit. We doing shit. We learning shit. We growing shit. Hey, we hatching chickens now. Something like that. But we doing shit, man. The objective is to become better. A better us. A better us. One of us at a time. A little bit at a time. And we're going to keep pushing and reading, assassinating books, man, one book at a time, one session at a time, one part at a time, one chapter at a time, one page at a time, man, one paragraph at a time, one sentence at a time. Here a little bit, there a little bit, till we seek and find the treasures that have been left behind in the sea of pages that have been laid before us. And right now, it is Africans in Colonial, Louisiana by Miss GWENDOLYN MIDLO Hall. That is the sea of pages that has been laid before us, and I'm going to roll my way through it. Roll. I'm going to roll until I get a crew and a big old boat, pirate, on the sea of pages, baby. Searching for the treasures. Searching for treasures. Let's knock them lies down. They say you want to hide something, put it in a book. Let's see what they hid from us, baby. Let's see what's being hid from us. So I hope everybody has a wonderful night. A wonderful night, man. I hope y'all have a wonderful day tomorrow. Hey, let's get going. We got a lot to do. We got a lot to do. Get off your ass. Let's do it. Shalom, everybody. I'm out. I'm shallow. I'm out here. I'm shallow out, baby.